I hear it.
You're on, Eric.
You're good. You're good. I'm on.
You're on.
I'm on. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Most of our crew is off in all directions. I don't know where Tim is. I think Molly's at a star party, and Alex may show up. So Terry's running the show. Gowrie's going to be watching YouTube, and please have your questions up there as Ron presents, and I'm going to be the talking head. And tonight we have Ron Brecher. Ron's a regular on our show. He always comes with something really interesting as far as processing. And over the last 5 years, I would say Starless processing has really taken over your processing, whether you're doing it in PixInsight or PixInsight in Photoshop, which is the way I do. So this is, I don't want to say this is something to pay attention to, but something I'm going to pay attention to, because there's always something to learn. As much as you think you know, as long as you've been doing this, there's always something here that's new, and you go, oh, I got to start doing that. And that's what Ron will be presenting tonight. Before we go there, let me just do a brief review of our calendar. You know our calendar. Go to the astroimagingchannel.org, click on calendar, and we got Ron this week. Next week, for all you fathers out there, we're taking a break for Father's Day. That's a good thing. And after that, we're having our anniversary show where we kind of review what's happened in the last year. We're making a couple of short presentations. And it's a little bit about us, the people that, make this show happen every week. After that, Deborah and Peter Saravola are going to be on. Deborah produces some incredible images, and Peter makes some incredible instruments for her to work with. And it should be a really interesting show. After that, John Hayes is going to be on. John, another regular, he always has something interesting to say. And you can read the rest of the calendar if you're interested. So let me get back to the live show. Of course, we do have open spots in our calendar, as you can see if you go there. If you have an idea of something you'd like to present, send us a note. There's a little contact page on the astroimagingchannel.org. Send us a note. Someone will get back to you, and you can be a presenter on the show. Even though you don't think you're an expert, again, if you have some experience, there's probably something that we would like to learn about. So don't be afraid to send us a little note and possibly become a presenter on the Astro Imaging channel. And I think that's all I have to say. So at this point, Ron, the show is yours.
Okay, I'm going to turn off my camera to save a bit of bandwidth and share my screen. Okay. You should see my screen. I know you can. And I'm going to hide that little window. And I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about starless image processing. Now, many of you have probably seen images like this, starless images. You won't see any of these from me. I've never published one completely starless. And it's because for me, the stars are very, very important to me in astro images. Showing a galaxy or a nebula without them is certainly artistically a viable choice for some people. But if I'm in control of the paintbrush, I'm going to have the stars in my picture at the end. And I want them to look as good as they can be. In fact, I want all parts of my image to look as good as they can possibly look. And sometimes what's good for one part of an image isn't good for another part of an image. So if you just look here, you can see there's a tremendous range of dynamic range between the brightest core, the core of the brightest stars, and the darkest dark nebulas in this image. And to get to this point in the processing called for very different treatment of the stars and the nebula. So for me, taking the stars out has a number of benefits, and these are the main ones that I notice all the time. And the first one is the reason why I take the stars out early. I'm going to walk you through my icon set in a moment. But delinearization, which is stretching an image, when you stretch the dim parts of an image, your stars can get really blown out. There are tools for mitigating that, but a really effective way to do it is to stretch the non-stellar features on the one hand, stretch the stars on the other, and then put them back together at some point down the road. Dynamic range compression. So if you have an image of something like the Orion Nebula or the Pleiades, it's going to have some really bright areas and some very dim areas. And when you stretch that with stars in it, everything gets kind of very, very bright. So just like when you start off with an image like this one, it's mostly dark with a few bright pixels. After stretching in a high dynamic range image, you're going to have mostly white pixels or nearly white pixels, and you have to compress that. The problem is if there's stars in the image, the stars are very prone to an artifact that looks like a little pinhole in the center of the star. And you might be able to protect the big stars and the medium-sized stars with a mask, but the small stars can also get affected, and they're very hard to protect. When you sharpen, if there's stars in an image, you can really get nasty looking stars with very hard edges. I like my stars to be, I want the edges to be firm and well defined, but I want a little bit of softness there. Also, color rendering. Once the stars are separated out of an image, you can apply different brightness, hue, and saturation to the non-stellar features that you can to the stars. And I'll show you that in this demo. If you have large-scale defects, and you're going to see I've got a lot of them in this image, they're very simple to repair once the stars are taken out. And the last thing I'll show you in this demo is how to replace your narrowband stars with stars from a broadband image. So there's lots of good reasons for taking the stars out of an image. Before I actually walk you through a process, I want to show you my icon set, which is over here. It's very easy to make an icon. You just open a particular process, whatever process you want to use, and drag the new instance triangle to the desktop with whatever settings you want to put in there. Maybe you want to say red, green, and blue, and so on. Once you drag that icon, you can rename it, right click, and change the identifier. That's how I made all the icons that you see here. And they really give me a top to bottom workflow. And I want to show you where star removal and star replacement fit in the workflow. So the main part of the workflow is from here to here. Above that and below that are utility belts that I use some of the time, but this is the heart of the processing workflow. And delinearization or stretching happens right here, about halfway down. So all these steps are before stretching, all these steps are after stretching. And you'll see I take the stars out before I stretch. This is where I take the stars out. And I put them back right before I save the final image, right at the end. So my stars are separate for most of the workflow. And let me show you a sample process. Here's where we're going to start off. And here's where I'm hoping we're going to finish. And I don't know if you could have predicted that we'd get such a nice result out of such a dog's breakfast of a starting point, but we do. And there's a history in this image because I processed it before to prepare for the workshop. Here's the history. And so what I want to do is walk through that history. It's right here. So every time we take a step, I can go here and show you the settings that I used if that's necessary. But the first thing I had to do I have to do some things before taking out the stars. So first I have to generally clean the image up. I need the stars for color calibration. And if you look closely, the stars aren't that round. I'm going to have to fix them with deconvolution. That's StarXTerminator. So that's these first few steps here that I'm going to show you very quickly. We'll just step through them. So the first thing that I did is I used the Graxpert script. This is an AI script that I used for removing this gradient, and I'm just going to apply it here, and we need to do a new auto stretch. You see the gradient's gone. The colors may still not be accurate. If I link the channels and do an auto stretch, it's not bad, but it still needs a little bit of adjustment. And that's what the first thing that I did before doing color calibration is fix the stars, because if there's any chromatic aberration in the stars, and if there is, we'll see it in the corners. Yeah, you can see red on the outside, blue on the inside. That's going to affect color calibration. So the first thing I did before color calibration is I ran StarXTerminator in correct only mode. That's what Russ Croman recommends. And when you do that, all that chromatic aberration is just going to disappear. I don't know if you could see particularly this star here, how it rounds out all the stars. And now we can do color calibration. And I just used a regular old color calibration for this. And step forward. This is now color calibrated. If I put a new auto stretch on, it looks pretty nice, nice and neutral. Now I did the full deconvolution with StarXTerminator. So deconvolution, I want you to, this is before, after, before, after. It looks like sharpening because the image looks sharper after you do it than it did before you started. But it is not a sharpening technique. Sharpening is about finding edges and enhancing contrast, whereas deconvolution is about mathematically backing out the atmospheric blur and any blur that's due to imperfections in your optics and your focus. So it's kind of like taking the cream out of the coffee. It operates on every pixel, not just on the edges. So this is before and after. And you have to have stars in your image in order to run StarXTerminator. The other option is you could measure your stars before you remove them. And then instead of using the automatic point spread function, you could manually enter the point spread function diameter here. But it's better to just leave the stars in and have them tidied up nicely by that deconvolution step. And as soon as I finished with deconvolution, I don't need the stars anymore. In fact, they're a hindrance, and so out they go. And now all the stars are gone out of this image. And what's left are galaxies and the main galaxy. I've still got these two dust donuts. Somebody called them bullet holes, I think. And if I don't forget, the auto stretch is just a tool to allow you to shine a light. I have a friend who's a plumber, and he has a light. He calls it his trouble light, because every time he shines it, he sees trouble, usually at my house. So this is my trouble light. I can just put a boosted auto stretch on here, and I can see there's a little bit of light coming in over here on the right. I don't know if you see that. It's most obvious right around here. I've also got a red dust donut right here. You see it right there that I'm going to need to clean up. And definitely, these are a problem. This also looks like a dust donut here, although not so visible. So now that the stars are gone, we can remove the noise, and that's what I did next. So there's noise exterminator. Don't forget, I've got a big boosted auto stretch on here. This is more, sorry, I should go back a step. This is more like what the image would look like at the end. This is a more realistic auto stretch. And now I'm going to do the histogram transformation. So I'm about to take the image from this linear state where most of the pixels are extremely dark. I'm about to now apply histogram transformation to this image and stretch it. Bring that histogram away from the black. And let's go ahead and do that. First, I'll turn off the auto stretch. So this is before and after. That's quite a nice stretch. I like about 10% gray in the background. How do you figure that out? Well, click on it and measure it, and you'll see it's all around 0.106, 0.108, 0.11. I click down here. I'm in the 0.10 something. So I set up my histogram to give me that nice bright, dark gray, but brightish background. I still have all those problems in here that I can reveal just by putting on that boosted auto stretch, shining my treble light, as it were. Now, if you didn't think you needed another boost of noise exterminator, let me show you something. This is the stretched image. I've got that boosted auto stretch. I'll turn that off. It looks pretty good now. But now I'm going to shine my treble light. If I apply noise exterminator, it gets a lot better. Before, after. So that's why you need 2 passes of noise exterminator, one before stretching, one after stretching. And this is kind of cool. I'm going to open up histogram transformation and go back a step. Oops, sorry. Yeah, I'm going to go back to before noise exterminator. Let's turn off the auto stretch so it doesn't blind you. I want you to look at the histogram, not at the image. And I want you to think about what noise is. So noise is a situation where some pixels are a little darker than they should be, and some are a little brighter than they should be. And when you apply noise reduction, some of those erroneously dark pixels should brighten, and some of the erroneously bright pixels should darken. So what should happen to the histogram is when you apply noise exterminator, the histogram should get narrower and taller. And that's exactly what's going to happen if I step forward to apply noise exterminator. Watch the histogram, particularly the top window here. So I'm just going to click now. And that means we've now kind of freed up a bunch of space here in the bottom to apply a second pass of histogram transformation and get a nice little bit of contrast boost. So watch when I apply it here. The background got darker, the galaxy got a little brighter. Before, after. That was from this step. Okay, now it's time to deal with all these defects. And I'm going to turn on the auto stretch just so you can see them better. And here I used the clone stamp tool. And I'm just going to go forward and back. Forward, back. They're all gone. How do you make that happen? I'll just do this on a clone of this so I don't lose the history. So what we do is we open the clone stamp tool, and one by one, you stamp out those defects. You can see them disappear. Actually, that wasn't very smart. Take my sample from here. And so on. Remember, this has a boosted auto stretch on it. If there was no stretch, you wouldn't even see the defects. So that's how I made all those problems go away. And if I just step forward, they're all gone. So the next thing I did was some pixel math. So we have kind of a burned out core here. What I did is I made a copy of the image. I could never do this, by the way, with stars. So this is one of the things that I was talking about when I mentioned here, dynamic range compression. If I tried to do this with bright stars in the image, I would get pinhole artifacts. But what I did is I made a clone of the image and compressed it pretty dramatically. I don't think it will show it, but you can see that that's much compressed by comparison. And then I blended the two using a mask. This mask, RGBL. So the only parts that got compression were the bright parts of the galaxy. And here's the blend. See how it darkens down? Just that core. Then with the same mask in place, I boosted the contrast. So here we've got local histogram equalization happening now. And I did that in 3 steps at 3 different scales. So 40, 90, and 140. And I just want to show you something. If I go to the final, I just want to show you what can happen if you try to do this with stars in the picture. I'll just take this middle one. Actually, I'll take the small scale. It might show best for that. I'm just going to go ahead and apply this. Now, yes, I know you could use masks when you're doing all of this. Do you see the darkening around some of these stars? It's even more obvious at small scales. You get these dark rings like raccoon eyes around the stars, and they don't look natural. There's a pretty bad one right around here. I don't know if you can see that as well as I can. But yeah, you can see half of it is pretty obvious there if I put that big auto stretch on. So this works much, much better if you don't have the stars in the image. And I applied that 3 times, so let's just go forward. And then I did a little bit of sharpening. Just a little. It's like cleaning your glasses. Before, really hard to see. Before, after. I don't know if you saw that little bit of brightening. That sharpening was very subtle. After, before, after. And then I added some color. But I did it through a mask. So it looks like that now. Starting to look really nice. Now, without any mask, I ran curves to just darken down the shadows very slightly and brighten up the galaxy very slightly. So that's after, before, after, before. I often say when I'm teaching, if you can see what I did, then I probably did too much. Then I saw a little bit of green. I think I saw it particularly when I put a boosted auto stretch. You can see some green in the background. So I got rid of that by applying SCNR. And again, if I had done this with the stars in the image, it would have affected their color. It would have changed, in particular, the blue stars. So that's gone now. And the next thing I did was just a couple of curves with a gradient mask. So this was a mask that was just selecting these two smaller galaxies. And I was brightening them. So let's look at them. So watch what happens with these next two steps. One, got a little bit less blue. Two, got quite a bit brighter. And the same happened with this galaxy here. Undo, undo. So less blue and brighter. And then I ran exponential transformation. So exponential transformation is for brightening faint parts, dimmer parts of an image. And the mask that I used is this mask, which just selected the galaxy. So what I'm expecting to happen is the galaxy's dim regions should brighten. Let me get rid of this preview, which is kind of making the view kind of ugly. So we want the bright parts not to get brighter and the dim parts to brighten a little bit. Sorry, I gotta get rid of that again. So before and after, there's your exponential transformation. Just a little bit. And then a curve. And in this curve, I boosted the saturation and I boosted the brightness again. So you can see all these nice things we can do. We're not having to worry about affecting the stars. I then added some color saturation, and I did a little bit more sharpening with an unsharp mask. I don't know if you saw that, just boost the contrast a little bit. There it is. Now we're down here. And 3 adjustments of curves. So 1, 2, 3. And let me show you the whole image. And I'm looking at that now, and I think it feels like it's a little bit overcooked. So let's just make that invisible. Go back a step or 2. So I did 3 of those. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's the third one that was too much. So that's good. So now I would be ready to put the stars back. But there's a problem. If we look at my stars are still unstretched. It turns out that if you hit the auto stretch button at this point, you're going to get a pretty ugly stretch. I'm not going to do that. When you run StarXTerminator, it calculates a really good auto stretch for the stars before it removes them. And if I just apply this, or actually I don't even need to apply it, just turn it on. That's the calculated auto stretch, and it's really quite nice. But the cool thing is before I make that permanent, I'm just going to transfer it to histogram transformation, transfer those settings. Let's turn off the screen stretch and get a real-time preview. So this is another real advantage of taking the stars out. I can make the stars more prominent or less prominent. I'm going to zoom in on this bottom window here so that I can get hold of this midtone slider right there. If I want the stars to be more prominent than they were, I just move to the left. You can see I'm getting more and bigger stars. They still look good. They're just more prominent. If I go back to where I was. If I want these stars to be less prominent, and maybe you would want this in a narrowband image or in an image that has tons and tons of stars in it, you can back off. And now you'll still keep the small stars, but look at the big stars. They're getting quite a bit smaller. So you can get to a sweet spot that you like. Now I'm not going to do this because I already did it before. So let me show you what I settled on. If you go forward one step, that's what I settled on for my stars. And it was a little bit less prominent than the StarXTerminator generated stretch.
Ron,
Now, yes.
Ron, can I, just to be clear, I think probably most people know this, but in StarXTerminator, you need to click the button to generate the star image along with the starless image.
Yeah, so StarXTerminator, here's the interface here. You need to say generate star image or it won't produce this image. And when I generate the star image, I use unscreened stars, whether I'm in the linear or nonlinear state. And I use large overlap because it sometimes produces better results. A little slower, that's all.
Thank you.
So this is my stretched star image, but you could see that it kind of lacks color. Now it would be pretty easy to just open up my curves and go to the saturation slider and just add a ton of color. I don't know if you can see how much color just went in there. Plenty. The problem is if I put an auto stretch on it, the color is all over the background too. That's no good. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is before we start adjusting these stars any further, I'm going to click on this little button here to extract the lightness of this image. In other words, I'm going to make a star mask. This image right here for this color star image. Tuck it away. So now, whatever I do next, masks are like stencils, right? So whatever I do next, I'm going to add some color through this red stencil. It's only going to affect the stars. So let's try this again now. If I go to curves and I boost the color, now it's only going into the stars. This does a really nice job. Now, if I put that boosted auto stretch on, you might still see some color in the background, but you won't see any of it without that auto stretch. It just does not show whatsoever. So let's turn off that auto stretch and go ahead. I've already done this, so I'll just step forward. And sorry, need to make the mask invisible, hide it, and there's my colorful stars. Now, I might even make these a little bit more colorful. One nice thing you might try when you're using, when you're working on the stars only image is instead of using saturation, try the colorfulness slider. That's C. Also called vibrance, and it's like saturation's wild sister. I'm just going to zoom in here to a small region. Watch what happens. Just lift the bottom point a little bit. You get a ton of color really fast. So you don't want to use a lot of that, but sometimes just a little bit. You have to be careful the centers of your stars don't burn out. If you do too much of this, your star centers are going to get pretty ugly. So once you've got the color that you want, go ahead and apply it. And it's only at this point that I would now put my stars back. And before you put the stars back, you want to make sure there's no mask in place. Because if I try to put my stars back now, they're only going to go back in the galaxy. Everything else is protected. So I'll take that mask off. And to put the stars back, this is the pixel math expression. I'm going to combine the target image with the stars only image, RGB stars, using the screening operation. Because remember, when we did StarXTerminator, we unscreened the stars. So we need to screen them when we put them back. And here we go. They look really natural and nice. All those horrible defects are gone. And I think I like this better than the version that I did on my own. So that's the first demo. The second demo is going to be a lot quicker. I haven't been watching my watch, so I hope I'm doing okay for time here. I want to
You're doing fine, Ron. And I don't see any questions. Might be a good point to look.
Oh,
Gary, do
yeah.
you have any questions that we've missed? I don't see.
I'm not seeing any questions. I've been looking.
Well, hopefully I'm answering everybody's questions as I go. But
Could I ask one question before you move on?
Sure.
Graxpert, I see
Yeah.
you had a default. Is there one particular way you use Graxpert?
Yeah, so Graxpert, no, there isn't one particular way I use Graxpert. So what I would do, I have to close this for this demo. I'm going to go back to the beginning of this history. So this is before Graxpert. And remember, this is what it looks like, right? So it's very blue dominant. If I link it or unlink the channels so you can see it better, it's got this big multiplicative nasty gradient in the corners and in the center, particularly in the red channel or maybe in the green channel, hard to tell. So what I did is I ran Graxpert twice. So first I ran it with division, but there's very little to do here except run it because it's an AI-based tool. So there's really, you're not putting points anywhere. All I'm doing is just telling it to replace the image. So that's what the multiplicative gradient removed. And now I'm going to run it a second time. This time with subtraction. And now I'll control click, oops, shift click. Now the additive gradient has been removed. And if I still didn't like that, I would probably run DBE. And I use a few big samples because I'm generally not trying to correct small scale gradients.
When you're ready, we've got 2 questions.
Yeah, you can ask another question while I'm doing this. I'm just going to apply this quickly. Oh.
Yeah. How black should empty space be?
Pardon me?
One of the questions is, how black should the empty space be?
This, like the background for me during my, so every astrophotographer is going to feel differently about this. But for me, I try to get my finished images between 0.5 and 0.05 and 0.1 in the background. So here you'll see it's 0.0863 for the red, 0.856 for the green, 0.854. It's not because 0.1 is a magic number. It's because we all have a tendency to over darken our images. And there's often a lot of faint detail that you're going to completely lose if you darken the image too much. So I would tend to have an image rather on the bright side during most of the processing and only darken it down at the end, right? And even there, hang on, I'm just going to close this. I just want to show you where I stretched it. So the stars were out. That's the stretch. That's the very first stretch. If you measure in the background, it's 0.105, 0.107. That avoids losing the faint stuff. A lot of people, when they do that initial stretch, so there's my stretch. A lot of people tend to over darken. So now I'm at about 0.04, 0.03. And if I try to pull the galaxy up too much, I'm going to start to get graininess that I really don't want. And I've clipped almost 0.2% of my pixels, so 23,000 pixels. That's just too much to clip. I would rather have that stretch be more, well, let's say more like I had it, and then sort of finesse it more gently with a tool like curves. If you want to darken the background a little bit, you can bring the background down a little bit. Hang on. Bring the background down a little bit and then bring the bright parts back up. You have a lot more control with a tool like this. So try to keep your background around 0.1. If you feel like you need to at the very end, you can dim it down a little bit. But generally, people tend to make things too dark. Maybe they're hiding defects or whatever. Learn how to correct those defects. Okay, let me just show you the last part of the demo. Oh, Gary, did you say there's another question?
Yeah, the two more questions.
Sure.
Yeah. So the next question is, do you prefer Graxpert to the new gradient correction tool in PixInsight?
You know, I use different tools for different images. The gradient correction tool does not work on multiplicative gradients. So this image, gradient correction just won't work, right? Because it's got this, oops, sorry. It's got this multiplicative gradient. In fact, let's try it. So there we are, and gradient correction is right here. And the advice would be put on automatic convergence. For this, I will generate a simplified model, which will take out some of the, maybe take out some of the multiplicative stuff. Maybe I'll use 3. I'll turn off structure protection because it's not really needed. And it's just not going to do that good a job. Okay. That's gradient correction. And here is Graxpert. So I don't tend to use gradient correction much. I prefer Graxpert. And Graxpert now, there's a Graxpert process that works well in Windows. I don't know if it's working yet for the Mac. Is there another question, Gary?
Yes. The next question was, do you ever use these gradient removal tools on starless images?
Of which?
On starless images, do you ever use gradient correction tools on
No,
starless?
no, because the order of my workflow, I remove the gradients before color calibration, and you need the stars in for color calibration.
Okay.
So you wouldn't take the stars out prior to doing the color calibration. You need the image intact for that step.
Great. Thanks, Ron.
Okay.
That's it for questions right now.
Okay, great. So there was one other thing I wanted to show you, and that's sometimes you shoot narrowband, and I don't know if you're like me, but I always find the stars in narrowband images just don't look nice. So this is a Hubble palette image of Sharpless 2-188, and it's been processed all the way through all the steps that I just showed you. And simultaneously, I also, or like on a different night, but same setup, I captured some RGB data. Just 21-minute exposures through each of red, green, and blue filters. And I processed that image exactly the same way, except I took the stars out as I would normally in my workflow. I took the stars out right here. But instead of throwing away the stars, I threw away the rest of the image. So I didn't keep the rest of the RGB image that had the nebula in it. I just threw that away and kept the stars. And I processed the stars like I showed you with the mask, and then applying curves and using saturation and colorfulness. And now what I can do is replace those ugly looking narrowband stars with these beautiful looking RGB stars. And doesn't that look beautiful? To me, that's way nicer than those kind of anemic, pinky, reddy narrowband stars. So this is how I do all of my narrowband stars. I shoot some RGB, even if I'm not going to use the background or the non-stellar object from the RGB. I shoot RGB stars, and instead of putting back the narrowband stars in my narrowband image, I put in the RGB stars. So that's the last thing that I wanted to show you. I think we covered, I just want to make sure we covered all of this. So stretching, yes. Sharpening, yes. We talked about what can happen to stars when you sharpen them. Yes, we did this. Large scale defects we talked about, and replacing narrowband stars. So that's what I wanted to cover tonight. So thanks for humoring me. And now I think I can stop sharing. All right.
Okay, you can turn your camera back on, Ron,
Thank you.
if you want. I know, I always have the same question. Do I really want my camera on? Sure, we are who we are. And as I said at the beginning of the program, by the way, thank you very much. As much as I think I know about all this, there are a couple things I made notes on. I didn't realize that Graxpert had it installed for PixInsight. For some reason, I used to use it as a standalone.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's got a script and now a process.
excellent.
Yeah.
I think we got all the questions. Again, an excellent presentation.
Yeah, I didn't want to just show you how to take the stars out and put them back, because we've covered that before. What's really important is all the things that you can do once those components are separate from each other. You just don't have to worry about compromise.
So I have another question. A lot of these nebulas that we shoot cover the entire screen. And I always kind of scratch my head and I'm going, what's a gradient and what's part of the nebula? Sometimes it may be sort of obvious, but it's never that obvious. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is I would probably recommend that you shoot smaller objects. You should always have some background. I'm not kidding. I know that sounds funny, but I'm not kidding. If you're struggling to get the object in your field, right, you're going to be cropping for sure if you dither. You're going to be losing more. So part of this is about targeting objects that fill about 70% of your field. That's about optimal. But I know there's some parts of the sky that are going to be completely nebulous. In that situation, what you might want to do is take a few images in a very close by adjacent area of sky and use that region for your for background neutralization or gradient correction. Also, the smart tools like Graxpert are very good at doing gradient correction, even in those crazy full fields. I don't know how they do it. It's artificial intelligence and maybe smarter than me, but it works. The other thing is if you look in DBE, you know, there's a smoothness control. That determines how aggressive everything is. So if you've got a very full field, I try to get a point into each corner if I can. And I use a relatively higher smoothness setting so that it's not going to subtract everything. It's just going to even things out. But, you know, it's like everything. There's some fields that are way harder than others, but I don't think I've ever found one I couldn't do with DBE.
Excellent advice. Gallery, I don't see any more questions. Let's see.
I did not see that.
Something just popped up from
Oh, yeah.
wanna...
Yep, I just see another question pop up. Do you think the screen star script is good enough to use versus pixel math?
Using which?
The screen stars script.
I don't know that script,
Okay.
so I can't comment on it. I would use the pixel math. I would use the pixel math either that I showed you. We also show that in the advanced integration workshop in Masters of PixInsight. But you can either use mine or on Russ Croman's website where he talks about StarXTerminator. He gives you the pixel math equation that he uses. It does exactly the same thing as the one I use. Mine is just easier to follow, you know, for me.
And Ron,
Okay.
with the Kerr's transformation, when you play with the C one, that works in LAB space as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably worth noting.
Yeah, it's basically the colorfulness.
Yeah.
It's colorful slider. It's like I think it's also called vibrance.
Yeah.
But it's the LAB. It's the LAB C star channel. CIE C star channel.
Yeah, I see another question. So, have you tried the new background finder PixInsight script created by Franklin Marek of SETI Astro?
No. I've heard how it works. It sounds very intriguing. It also might help answer the question that Eric asked: how do you find background in a really full field? But no, I have not tried it myself.
There's always something new. So nice questions popping up right at the end, but I think we've got to the end of the presentation. And once again, Ron, excellent. You're welcome to come back anytime you have something that you'd like us to hear. And once again, for our audience, If one of you feels like you have something else to add to the show, go to the astroimagingchannel.org, go to the contact sheet, send us a note, and someone will get back to you. So
And let me
anything
just
more? Contact information from
Yeah,
you.
just before I say goodbye, I didn't have a slide, so I put my website up so you could see it. If you want to get a hold of me, astrodoc.ca, proudly Canadian. So it's astrodoc.ca. And once you're here, you'll see a page like this. If you click on any of these images that are scrolling by, it's going to take you to the post for that website. But most importantly, you can sign up for my mailing list and get new images. And at the bottom of the page, you can comment on these, or you can you can comment directly to me. I'm the only one that will see it. So feel free to reach out if you either want help with imaging or you have a question about one of my pictures. No problem. So astrodoc.ca.
And before we say goodnight, remember next week is Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to everyone out there. That's our audience. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, what do we have?
Sorry.
Our 10th anniversary. Do we have another question that's popped up, Gowrie?
I actually saw Chris pointed out a comment. It didn't have a question mark, so I wasn't sure. It's posted more as a problem. I'll read it out.
Okay.
I have found removing my stars leaves holes and splotches and everything, and it looks terrible and gets hard to process. Adding the stars back, it usually looks okay, but no idea until I add them back.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. It would depend on the image. Every image is different.
Yeah.
Got to see the settings.
I think we'll have to leave that one for a question in the future. And of course, you can always post your questions on Cloudy Nights and other forums, and people always have ideas on how to handle them. But if we're all set, I'll say good night to our audience, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks again, Ron.
Yeah.
Good night,
Bye, everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Terry, you want to take us out?
Terry and Carrie.